The Texas sun hung low over KMA that October afternoon, casting long amber shadows across the wooden pier. It was Saturday, October 18th, 2003, and the temperature had finally dropped to a merciful 78 degrees after weeks of relentless Gulf Coast heat. 16-year-old Alexa Barth stood at her bedroom window in their two-story rental house on Bay Avenue, watching sailboats glide across Clear Lake. She wore denim shorts and a pale yellow tank top, her sun-streaked brown hair pulled into a messy ponytail. In the afternoon light, hazel eyes flecked with gold scanned the street below in search of something or someone. Downstairs, her mother, Rachel, was folding laundry in the living room while CNN played quietly on the television. The anchor was discussing troop movements in Iraq. Rachel, 39 years old, barely glanced up from the clothing basket as she worked double shifts as a waitress at the KMA boardwalk. Her husband, Derek, Alexa's stepfather, wouldn't be home from his job at the refineries until after 7. It was just another ordinary Saturday in their ordinary lives. Alexa had told her mother she was meeting her friend Brittany at the boardwalk around 5. They planned to walk the pier, maybe ride the Ferris wheel, grab some frozen lemonade. Standard teenage weekend plans. Before we go further into this unsettling case, if you value true cold case mysteries like this one, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new investigation. Tell us in the comments what city and state you are observing from. We're curious where our community is spread across the country. Rachel had barely registered the information when Alexa kissed her cheek and headed for the door. "Be back by 9, Rachel said mechanically, her eyes still on the laundry. "I will," Alexa replied. The screen door slammed shut with its familiar metallic clang. Rachel would remember that sound for 17 years. Alexa walked down Bay Avenue toward the boardwalk, her flip-flops slapping against the pavement. Neighbors would later report seeing her pass by around 4:45 in the afternoon. Mrs. Henderson, watering her azaleas 2 houses down, waved. Alexa waved back. Mr. Chen, washing his Chevy Silverado in his driveway, nodded hello. Alexa smiled politely and kept walking. Everything was routine. Everything was normal. The KMA boardwalk was 6 blocks from the Barth house, a straight shot down Bay Avenue and then a right turn onto the main tourist strip. The walk took less than 15 minutes. Security footage from the Shell gas station on the corner of at 4:52 in the afternoon, Bay and Marina Drive, caught Alexa checking her Nokia flip phone while she waited for the traffic light to change. She crossed the street and continued toward the boardwalk entrance. At 5:04, Alexa appeared on the boardwalk security camera near the entrance archway. She stood beneath the painted wooden sign that read, "Welcome to KMA Boardwalk," in cheerful red letters, looking around as if waiting for someone. She checked her phone again. Her body language suggested mild impatience. She shifted her weight from foot to foot. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Then, at 5:11, she pulled her phone out again. This time, she read something on the screen that changed her expression. It wasn't alarm exactly. It was more like recognition mixed with uncertainty. She typed a quick response, her thumbs moving rapidly over the tiny keypad. She looked around one more time, then turned away from the boardwalk entrance and walked back in the direction she had come from. She, on the other hand, left onto Marina Drive instead of going home. That left turn was the last time anyone saw Alexa Barth in person for 17 years. By 6:30, Rachel began to feel the first stirrings of concern. Alexa usually checked in when she arrived somewhere, a habit Rachel had insisted on after giving her daughter the cell phone 6 months earlier. Rachel dialed Alexa's number. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. "Hey, sweetie, just checking in. Call me when you get this." She hung up and went back to making dinner, telling herself not to be one of those paranoid mothers who panicked the moment their teenager was out of sight. By 7:15, concern became worry. Rachel called again. Voicemail, again. She contacted Brittany's residence. Brittany's mother answered, no, Brittany was home. She'd been home all afternoon. She hadn't made plans with Alexa that day. Rachel felt sick to her stomach. Are you sure? She inquired. Positive, Brittany's mother replied. Brittany's been helping me bake cookies since 3 o'clock. Rachel called Derek at work. He was just finishing his shift. Alexa's not home yet, and she's not answering her phone. She said she was meeting Brittany, but Brittany's mother says they never had plans. Derek told her to stay calm, that maybe Alexa had gone somewhere else and forgot to mention it. I'll be home in 20 minutes. We'll figure it out. By 8 o'clock, both Rachel and Derek were driving around KMA searching for their daughter. They checked the boardwalk, the beach, the movie theater, the Dairy Queen, where Alexa and her friends sometimes hung out. Nobody had seen her. Rachel called every friend whose number she had saved in the kitchen drawer where she kept important contacts. None of them had seen Alexa since school on Friday. At 9:45 that night, Rachel called the KMA Police Department. The dispatcher took down the information with professional efficiency. A 16-year-old girl, last seen around 5 o'clock in the afternoon, wearing denim shorts and a yellow tank top, brown hair in a ponytail.
The dispatcher explained that in cases involving teenagers, especially those close to 17, the police typically waited 24 hours before initiating a formal missing persons investigation, unless there is evidence of immediate danger. Rachel's voice cracked. She's never done this before. Something's wrong. I know something's wrong. The dispatcher assured her that an officer would come by to take a report. Officer Daniels arrived at the Barth house at 10:30. He was young, maybe late 20s, with a military-style haircut and a neutral expression that had been trained to show neither alarm nor dismissal. He asked standard questions. Did Alexa have a boyfriend? Had she seemed upset lately? Had there been any arguments at home? Was she having trouble at school? Did she use drugs or alcohol? Rachel answered each question with increasing desperation. No boyfriend that she knew of. Alexa seemed fine. Maybe a little quieter than usual recently, but nothing dramatic. No arguments. Grades were decent, mostly B's and C's, and absolutely no drugs or alcohol. Officer Daniels wrote everything down in his notebook. He asked for a recent photograph. Rachel provided her school picture from that year, the one where Alexa smiled with her lips closed, her hazel eyes looking directly at the camera. The officer took the photo and assured them he would file the report immediately and that someone from the detective division would follow up in the morning. After he left, Rachel sat on Alexa's bed in the dark, holding her daughter's favorite stuffed bear, a worn brown creature named Coco that Alexa had owned since she was 4. The room smelled like her daughter's vanilla body spray. Rachel would later say that she knew in that moment, sitting in the dark with Coco in her arms, that Alexa was not coming home that night. How does a teenage girl vanish in broad daylight 6 blocks from home? The question would haunt Ka for nearly 2 decades. Sunday morning arrived with a cloudless sky that felt almost cruel in its brightness. Rachel hadn't slept. She sat at the kitchen table with cold coffee in her hands, staring at her cell phone, willing it to ring. Derek had been up since dawn, driving the same streets they'd covered the night before, hoping that somehow in daylight he would spot something they'd missed. At 8:30, Detective Marcus Webb from the Kemah Police Department arrived at their door. He was a man in his early 50s with graying hair and deep lines around his eyes that suggested he'd seen too much of what people were capable of doing to each other. He carried a leather notebook and wore a wedding ring that he twisted absently as he spoke, a nervous habit Rachel would come to recognize over the following weeks. Detective Webb asked to see Alexa's room. Rachel led him upstairs, her legs feeling heavy as concrete. The room was exactly as Alexa had left it the day before. Her bed was unmade. At the foot, the purple comforter became tangled. Posters of Beyoncé and Justin Timberlake covered the walls. Her backpack sat on her desk chair, stuffed with textbooks and folders. Her laptop, a bulky Dell that the family had bought the previous Christmas, sat closed on the desk. Detective Webb put on latex gloves and opened the laptop. He asked Rachel for the password. She didn't know it. Alexa had never shared it, and Rachel had never thought to ask. Webb said he would take the computer to the station where their tech specialist could access it. He also asked for Alexa's cell phone records. Rachel gave him the account information for their Sprint family plan. While Webb examined the room, Rachel stood in the doorway answering more questions. Yes, Alexa had seemed distracted recently, maybe for the past month or so. She'd been spending more time on the computer in the evenings. No, Rachel hadn't monitored what she was doing online. She had believed in her daughter. Did Alexa keep a journal? Although she had never specifically sought one, Rachel was of the opinion that it wasn't. Webb opened Alexa's closet and checked the shelves, then got down on his hands and knees to look under the bed. He discovered magazines, a few hair ties scattered about, and an old shoebox full of elaborately folded triangular-shaped notes that girls had passed around in class. He collected these items carefully, placing them in evidence bags. Derek returned home during the search, his face haggard. He had nothing to report from his morning drive. Webb asked Derek the same questions he had asked Rachel.
The responses were consistent. Alexa was a good kid, quiet, maybe a little shy. She got decent grades without being pushed. She had a small circle of friends. She wasn't rebellious. She didn't sneak out at night. She followed the rules. By mid-afternoon, Detective Webb had obtained Alexa's cell phone records from Sprint. On Saturday, between 4:30 and 5:15 p.m., Alexa received 3 text messages, according to the data. All 3 came from a number that Rachel and Derek didn't recognize. When Webb called the number, it went away. A records check revealed that the phone had been a prepaid track phone purchased with cash at a Walmart in League City 2 weeks earlier. No name was attached to the account. This discovery shifted the entire nature of the investigation. Alexa hadn't simply wandered off or run away on impulse. Someone had been communicating with her, someone who had specifically purchased an untraceable phone. Webb's next step was to interview Alexa's friends. He started with Brittany Morris, the girl Alexa had supposedly planned to meet at the boardwalk. Brittany, also 16, lived 3 streets over from the Barth house. She was a soft-spoken girl with braces and auburn hair who seemed genuinely shocked by Alexa's disappearance. Brittany confirmed that she and Alexa were friends, but not particularly close friends. They ate lunch together at school sometimes with a larger group. They'd hung out a few times over the summer, but hadn't made specific plans for that Saturday. When Detective Webb, Brittany hesitated before responding when she was asked if Alexa had mentioned meeting anyone else. She'd been talking to someone online, Brittany said quietly, her mother sitting beside her on the couch. She didn't tell me much about it, but I got the impression it was a guy. She seemed excited about it, but also secretive. Like she didn't want people to know. Webb leaned forward. Did she mention a name? Anything specific about this person? Brittany shook her head. Just that he was older. Not like old, but older than us, maybe in his 20s. She said he really understood her, that he listened to her in a way that other people didn't. I told her to be careful because, people online can lie about who they are, but she said she'd seen pictures and talked to him on the phone and that he was real. This information was crucial. Webb returned to the station and immediately requested a forensic examination of Alexa's computer. The tech specialist, a young woman named Lisa Park, who looked barely out of college herself, worked through the night cracking Alexa's password. She succeeded at 2 in the morning. What Lisa found painted a troubling picture. Alexa's internet history showed frequent visits to a website called Teen Connect, an early social networking site popular in 2003 before MySpace and Facebook dominated the landscape. Alexa had created a profile under the username SunsetGirl16, where she'd posted photos of herself and written brief updates about her life. Typical teenage musings about school, music, and feeling misunderstood. In her private messages, Lisa discovered a months-long conversation with a user called TJ Houston 29. The messages began innocently enough in late July. TJ had complimented one of Alexa's photos. They'd started chatting about music. He said he was 24, worked in construction, and lived in Houston.
He shared photos of himself, a good-looking man with dark hair and blue eyes, posing next to a motorcycle, standing on a beach holding a guitar. As the weeks progressed, the messages became more personal. TJ told Alexa she was mature for her age, that she was different from other girls, that he felt a real connection with her. Alexa gave a fervent response, evidently delighted by the attention. By September, they were messaging almost daily. TJ had sent her his phone number, the track phone number that was now disconnected. They'd started texting. The messages from mid-October were the most revealing. TJ had suggested they meet in person. Alexa had been nervous but excited. They'd planned to meet at the Kama Boardwalk on Saturday, October 18th at 5 o'clock. But in the last message sent at 5:58 that afternoon, TJ had written, "Change of plans. My car broke down near the marina. Can you meet me at the boat launch parking lot on Marina Drive? It's just around the corner from the boardwalk. My vehicle will be a blue Ford pickup." At 5:09, Alexa had responded, "Okay, I'm coming." Detective Webb stared at the screen, his jaw tight. This wasn't a runaway case. This was an abduction. A predator had spent months grooming a 16-year-old girl online, gaining her trust, building a relationship, and then luring her to a secondary location away from cameras and witnesses. Webb immediately tried to trace the Teen Connect account. The profile for TJ Houston 29 had been created in July using a fake email address from a free provider. The photos were stolen from a modeling portfolio of a man in California who had no idea his images were being used.
The IP addresses from which TJ had logged in showed access from multiple public libraries across the Houston metropolitan area, locations with no security cameras where someone could use a computer anonymously. TJ, whoever he was, knew how to hide his tracks. By Monday morning, the case had escalated from a local missing person investigation to a potential interstate abduction. The FBI was notified. Special Agent Carmen Ruiz from the Houston field office arrived in Kama by noon. She was a specialist in crimes against children and online predators, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a nonsense demeanor. Agent Ruiz reviewed everything Webb had gathered. She immediately requested security footage from every business along Marina Drive. A public access point for recreational boaters was the boat launch parking lot where Alexa had supposedly gone to meet TJ. A gravel lot with no security cameras of its own, but there was a bait shop across the street that had a camera pointed toward the road. The footage was grainy and the angle wasn't ideal, but it showed a blue Ford F-150 pulling into the boat launch parking lot at 5:13 on Saturday afternoon. 2 minutes later, a figure matching Alexa's description appeared walking quickly down the sidewalk. She approached the truck. The driver's side door opened. A man got out, though his face wasn't visible from this angle due to a baseball cap pulled low over his features. The footage showed what appeared to be a brief conversation. Alexa gestured with her hands, animated. The man stood with his hands in his pockets, his posture relaxed. After about 90 seconds, Alexa walked around to the passenger side and got into the truck. At 5:17, the blue Ford F-150 pulled out of the parking lot and turned left onto Marina Drive, heading toward the highway. The truck and the 16-year-old girl inside it disappeared into afternoon traffic. The license plate, due to the camera angle and resolution quality, was completely illegible. Rachel collapsed when she saw the footage. Derek caught her before she hit the floor. Agent Ruiz paused the video and waited for them to compose themselves. "She got in willingly," Rachel whispered, her voice breaking. "She thought she knew him. She thought she was safe." The realization that Alexa had walked directly into danger, believing she was meeting someone who cared about her, was almost harder to bear than any other scenario Rachel had imagined. Over the following days, the case exploded into regional news. Alexa's school photo appeared on television broadcasts throughout Texas. Agent Ruiz held a press conference appealing for information about the blue Ford F-150, or anyone who might have seen Alexa after 5 on Saturday. Tips flooded in, but none led anywhere concrete. Someone reported seeing a blue truck at a rest stop near Galveston. Another caller claimed to have seen a girl matching Alexa's description at a gas station in Beaumont. Every lead was investigated. Every single one turned into a dead end. The blue Ford F-150 seemed to have vanished as completely as Alexa herself. By the end of October, 3 weeks after Alexa's disappearance, the investigation had stalled. The man calling himself TJ had been meticulous. No digital fingerprints that could be linked to his real identity were left behind. The truck couldn't be tracked without a license plate. There were thousands of blue Ford F-150s registered in Texas alone. Rachel quit her job at the boardwalk because she couldn't bear to work in the place where she'd last expected to find her daughter safe and happy. She spent her days calling the police station, checking for updates, printing flyers with Alexa's photo, and posting them on every telephone pole and storefront window in Kama and the surrounding towns. Derek took unpaid leave from the refinery. He drove hundreds of miles through southeast Texas, stopping at truck stops and diners, showing Alexa's photo to anyone who would look at it. He visited hospitals and homeless shelters. He walked through neighborhoods in Houston where runaways sometimes congregated. He searched with the frantic energy of a man who was unwilling to accept that his stepdaughter could simply vanish without a trace. But as November turned to December and Christmas approached with Alexa's empty chair at the dinner table, a terrible truth began to settle over the Barth household like a suffocating fog. They didn't know if their daughter was still alive because she was gone. The first Christmas without Alexa was unbearable. Rachel left the tree in its box in the garage. She was too distraught to decorate, to act normal when her daughter's bedroom remained frozen in time upstairs. Derek tried to maintain some semblance of routine, but his efforts felt hollow. On Christmas morning, they sat in silence at the kitchen table, drinking coffee neither of them wanted, avoiding each other's eyes. By January 2004, the media attention had begun to fade. Alexa's case was no longer the lead story on the evening news. Other tragedies, other disappearances took her place in the headlines. Detective Webb continued working the case, but he had other investigations demanding his attention.
Rachel was assured by Agent Ruiz that she would be notified immediately if any new evidence surfaced when she returned to Houston. The tips that had flooded in during the first week slowed to a trickle. Most were well-meaning but useless. A woman in Austin claimed to have seen Alexa working at a coffee shop, but when police investigated, it was a different girl entirely. A man in Oklahoma called to say he'd given a ride to a hitchhiker matching Alexa's description, but the timing didn't align with the known facts of the case. In February, there was a moment of agonizing hope. A drainage canal 15 miles from Kima, near Texas City, contained a body. The remains were those of a young female, estimated age between 15 and 20. Rachel received the call at 9 in the morning. She vomited immediately, her body rejecting the possibility before her mind could fully process it. Derek drove her to the medical examiner's office, where they waited in a sterile room with fluorescent lights that hummed too loudly. 3 hours later, they learned the body was not Alexa. Dental records didn't match. The girl in the canal had been dead for at least 6 months, possibly longer. She was someone else's daughter, another family's tragedy. Rachel felt guilty for the relief that washed over her, guilty that her first emotion upon learning another girl was dead was gratitude that it wasn't Alexa. Detective Webb expanded the investigation, looking into registered sex offenders in the Houston and Galveston County areas. He cross-referenced names with vehicle registrations, searching for anyone who owned a blue Ford F-150. The list was staggeringly long. He prioritized those with prior convictions involving minors and conducted interviews with dozens of men. None produced credible evidence linking them to Alexa's disappearance. Webb also worked with Teen Connect administrators to see if TJ Houston 29 had created other accounts or contacted other young girls. The website cooperated fully, providing data that showed TJ's account had been dormant since October 19th, the day after Alexa vanished. There was no record of him creating new profiles. Either he'd stopped using the site entirely, or he'd gotten sophisticated enough to mask his digital presence completely. Rachel became consumed with online research. She joined forums for families of missing children, reading thousands of posts from other parents trapped in the same nightmare. She learned terms she'd never wanted to know: stranger abduction, familial abduction, endangered runaway. She came across statistics that made her blood run cold. Most children abducted by strangers who aren't recovered within the first 72 hours are never found alive. But Rachel refused to accept that outcome. She created a website called findalexabarrett.com, where she posted updates, shared flyers, and pleaded for information. She learned basic HTML coding from library books so she could maintain the site herself. By March 2004, the website had received over 10,000 visits, mostly from people offering prayers and well wishes, but occasionally from someone claiming to have information. Most of these tips led nowhere. A woman in Louisiana swore she'd seen Alexa at a Walmart. Police checked the security footage. It wasn't her. A trucker called to say he'd picked up a teenage girl near Beaumont who looked like Alexa's photo. When pressed for details, his story fell apart under scrutiny. A psychic from California sent a long email describing visions of Alexa being held in a barn near water. Derek and Rachel traveled to each rural property they could find near Clear Lake, searching for barns. They found nothing. The investigation revealed one disturbing pattern that Webb shared with Rachel in late April. 3 other teenage girls had disappeared from towns along the Gulf Coast over the past 5 years. One from Corpus Christi in 1999, one from Port Arthur in 2001, one from Lake Jackson in 2002. All were between 14 and 17. All had been active on internet chat rooms or social networking sites. All had simply vanished without concrete evidence of their fate. Webb cautioned against drawing conclusions too quickly. The cases might not be connected. Teenage runaways were tragically common, but the similarities were striking enough that the FBI opened a broader investigation into possible serial predation along the I-45 corridor between Houston and Galveston. None of those other girls had ever been found. Rachel tried not to think about what that might mean for Alexa. By summer 2004, nearly a year after Alexa's disappearance, the active investigation had essentially stopped. Webb still returned Rachel's calls, still followed up on any tips that came in, but he was honest with her about the reality. Without new evidence, without a witness coming forward, without Alexa or her remains being discovered, the case had nowhere to go. Derek returned to work at the refinery. They needed the income. Medical bills were piling up because Rachel had developed severe anxiety and insomnia that required prescription medication. Their marriage, already strained by grief, began showing deeper cracks. They couldn't talk about Alexa without fighting, couldn't avoid talking about her without feeling like they were betraying her memory. Rachel attended a support group for parents of missing children at a church in Webster. Sitting in a circle with 7 other mothers and 2 fathers, all of them sharing the same hollow-eyed exhaustion, she realized this was her life now, this permanent state of not knowing, this existence suspended between hope and despair, unable to grieve properly because there was no body, unable to move forward because there was no closure. A woman named Patricia, whose son had disappeared in 1997, told Rachel something that stayed with her. The not knowing is its own kind of death. Patricia said, but you learn to live in it. You don't have a choice. The second anniversary of Alexa's disappearance, October 18, 2005, was marked by a small vigil at the Kama Boardwalk. About 40 people attended, mostly neighbors and members of Rachel's church. They lit candles and released balloons with Alexa's photo attached. Rachel stood holding a poster-sized version of her daughter's school picture and tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. Derek finished the brief statement for her, thanking everyone for not forgetting Alexa. But people were forgetting. That was the terrible truth. Life moved on for everyone except those directly touched by loss. Alexa's friends graduated from high school and left for college. The boardwalk hired new employees who were unaware of the girl's disappearance. Even some family members stopped calling as frequently, their initial concern giving way to uncomfortable silence when nothing changed month after month. Derek and Rachel split up in 2006. The grief had become a wedge between them that neither could overcome. Derek moved to an apartment in League City. Rachel remained in the Bay Avenue residence. Unable to leave the last place Alexa had called home, she kept her daughter's room exactly as it was, down to the unmade bed and the backpack on the chair. Detective Webb retired in 2008. He'd worked the Alexa Barth case for 5 years without solving it, and Rachel knew it haunted him. At his retirement party, he pulled her aside and told her he was sorry, that he'd done everything he possibly could. Rachel believed him. She hugged him and thanked him for not giving up, even though, in the end, not giving up hadn't been enough. The case was transferred to Detective Sarah Chen, a younger officer with less experience but genuine compassion. Chen reviewed the entire file, looking for anything Webb might have missed. She found nothing new. The trail had gone cold years ago. Rachel had come to terms with the grim reality by 2010, 7 years after Alexa vanished. Her daughter was almost certainly dead. No teen spent 7 years in captivity without discovering some evidence. However, Rachel was unable to fully accept it. Some stubborn part of her, the part that had grown Alexa in her womb and held her as an infant and taught her to read, refused to accept death without proof. She continued updating FindAlexaBarth.com, though weeks sometimes passed between posts. She kept boxes of flyers in her garage, though she no longer had the energy to distribute them widely. She attended the annual vigil at the boardwalk, though attendance dwindled each year. In 2012, only 12 people showed up. Rachel lost her home as a result of the economic collapse. She moved into a small apartment in Seabrook, taking only essentials. However, she brought each document pertaining to Alexa's case, including each and every box of newspaper clippings and folder. She brought Alexa's stuffed bear, Coco, and she brought one suitcase of her daughter's clothes, unable to part with them even after nearly a decade. By 2015, 12 years after that terrible October Saturday, Rachel had developed a routine that kept her functional, if not exactly alive. She worked part-time at a grocery store. She went to her support group every Thursday evening. She visited Alexa's memorial bench that was put in close to the boardwalk by the city, a small wooden bench with a plaque that read, "In memory of Alexa Barth, 1987-2003, forever in our hearts." The dates on the plaque bothered Rachel. 2003 implied death, implied an ending, but there'd never been an ending, never been certainty. Just this endless, exhausting not knowing. Detective Chen still called occasionally with updates, though the updates were always the same. No new information. Case remains open. In 2017, 14 years after Alexa vanished, Derek died of a heart attack at age 56. Rachel attended the funeral, standing at the back of the small crowd, and realized that Derek had died without ever knowing what happened to his stepdaughter. He'd carried that burden to his grave. Rachel was 53 years old. She'd spent more than a quarter of her life searching for answers that never came. She'd aged decades in those years, her hair gone gray, her face etched with permanent lines of grief. She rarely, if ever, looked in the mirror, recognized herself. And then on a Thursday evening in September 2020, 17 years after Alexa disappeared, Rachel's phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer. She was worn out from her grocery store shift and did not want to talk to telemarketers. But something made her pick up.
The voice on the other end said, "Mrs. Barth, this is Detective Chen. I need you to sit out. We found something." Rachel's hands trembled so violently she nearly dropped the phone. She sat down on her worn couch, her heart hammering against her ribs. "What did you find?" Her voice came out as a whisper. Detective Chen's tone was carefully measured, the voice of someone trained to deliver information without making promises.
A woman in Austin posted something on a missing persons Facebook group this afternoon. She was going through old photo albums from her daughter's wedding last month and noticed someone in the background of several pictures. She thought the woman looked familiar, so she ran a reverse image search and found your Find Alexa Barth website. Rachel couldn't breathe. The room tilted. "Are you saying someone saw Alexa?" "I'm saying we have a credible lead that needs to be investigated. The woman in the photos appears to be in her 30s, which would be consistent with Alexa's current age. She has similar facial structure and distinctive hazel eyes. I've already contacted the woman who posted the photos. The wedding took place at a venue in Round Rock on August 15th. The woman in question was a guest, apparently connected to the groom's side of the family." Rachel's mind raced. Round Rock was near Austin, more than 200 miles from Caw. Alexa would be 33 years old now, not the 16-year-old girl frozen in time in Rachel's memory. After 17 years, is it really her? "What happens now?" Rachel asked, her voice shaking. "I'm driving to Austin first thing tomorrow morning. I'm going to talk to the bride's family and try to identify this woman. If we can get a name and location, we'll proceed from there. I wanted you to know immediately, but Mrs. Barth, I need you to prepare yourself. Perhaps this is not Alexa. I don't want to give you false hope." But hope, false or not, was already flooding through Rachel's body like electricity. For the first time in 17 years, there was something concrete to hold on to, something more substantial than psychic visions and mistaken sightings at Walmart that night. Rachel didn't sleep at all. She sat at her laptop, refreshing the Facebook group page for the missing person until she found the post that Detective Chin had mentioned. It had been shared by a woman named Jennifer Pacheco, who'd written, "I was looking through my daughter's wedding photos and noticed this woman in the background. Something about her seemed familiar. I did some searching and found this missing persons case from 2003. Could this be her? The eyes are so distinctive." The post included 3 photographs. In the first, taken at what appeared to be an outdoor reception under string lights, a woman in a navy blue dress stood in the background near a dessert table. Her face was partially turned away from the camera, but her profile was visible. She had short brown hair styled in a modern cut, and she was holding a glass of champagne. In the second photo, the same woman sat at a table with several other guests. This image showed more of her face, though she was looking down at her plate, not directly at the camera. She appeared to be laughing at something someone had said. The third photo was the clearest. The woman was standing near the edge of the frame, apparently leaving or arriving, caught mid-motion. At about three-quarter view, her face was angled toward the camera. The hazel eyes were unmistakable. That same gold-flecked color Rachel had looked into thousands of times when Alexa was a child. Rachel zoomed in on the image until the pixels became blurry. The woman's features had matured. Her face had lost the softness of adolescence. But there was something in the shape of her nose, the line of her jaw, the way she held her shoulders slightly hunched forward as if trying to make herself smaller. Rachel had seen Alexa stand exactly that way her entire life, a physical manifestation of her shyness. It might be her. It could really be her. Rachel didn't allow herself to think about what it would mean if this woman was Alexa. Where had she been for 17 years? Why hadn't she come home? The questions were too enormous, too painful to consider until she knew for certain. The following afternoon, Detective Chin called from Austin.
I spoke with the bride's mother. The woman in the photos is named Michelle Cordero. She's a friend of the groom's sister-in-law. She lives in San Marcos and works as a dental hygienist at a clinic there. Michelle Cordero, Rachel repeated. The name meant nothing to her. Did you talk to her? Not yet. I wanted to do some background research first. Mrs. Barth, this is where things get interesting. Michelle Cordero obtained her driver's license in 2006. Before that, there was no evidence of her existence in any state database. No birth certificate, no records of her education, and no employment history. She appeared in the system as a 20-year-old woman in 2006 with a GED and a Social Security number that was issued that same year. Rachel's breath caught. So, it's a fake identity. Exactly. Not.
The Social Security number is legitimate, issued through proper channels, but the circumstances are unusual. The documentation she provided to obtain it claims she'd been homeschooled her entire life by parents who are off-grid preppers. She said her parents died in a car accident when she was 19, and she had no other family. The story was plausible enough that it passed initial scrutiny. "Can you get her DNA?" Rachel asked. "I'm working on obtaining a court order, but I need sufficient probable cause. A resemblance in a wedding photo isn't quite enough on its own. I'm building a case. I've asked for access to her employment records and any other documentation in the interim. I'm also going to talk to people who know her and see if anyone noticed anything unusual about her past." Rachel desired to immediately drive to San Marcos, wanted to knock on Michelle Cordero's door and look into her eyes and finally know if this was her daughter, but Chen warned her against it. If this is Alexa, and if she's been living under an assumed identity for 17 years, there's a reason. We need to approach this carefully. I can assure you, Mrs. Barth, I'm making this my top priority. The next week was the longest of Rachel's life, and that was saying something, given the 17 years she'd already endured. Chen called with updates every day. She'd spoken to Michelle Cordero's co-workers at the dental clinic. They all described her as quiet, competent, and private. She'd worked there for 10 years, always showed up on time, never caused problems. She had only a basic Facebook profile and no other social media accounts, photos, and minimal information. Chen spoke to Michelle's landlord, who said she'd been renting the same one-bedroom apartment since 2008. She always paid rent on time, never complained, kept to herself. She had no visitors that the landlord had noticed. She drove a Toyota Camry in white. She lived an almost invisible life. "It's the profile of someone who doesn't want to be noticed," Chen told Rachel. "Someone who's deliberately keeping a low profile." On September 28th, 2 weeks after the initial phone call, Chen secured a court order to obtain a DNA sample from Michelle Cordero. The legal justification was based on the combination of the photographic resemblance, the suspicious lack of background documentation, and the proximity of Michelle's age to Alexa's. On a Wednesday afternoon, Chen and 2 other officers went to Michelle's place of employment. Rachel waited by her phone, unable to eat, unable to think about anything else. At 4:30, the call came in. She agreed to provide a sample voluntarily, Chen said. She seemed nervous, but not hostile. She asked why we needed it, and I explained that we were investigating a cold case and needed to rule out certain possibilities. She didn't refuse, but she didn't ask any follow-up questions either, which I found notable. Most people in that situation want to know more. The DNA sample was sent to the Texas Department of Public Safety Crime Lab with a rush order. The comparison would be made against the DNA sample Rachel had provided years ago. DNA which confirmed her biological relationship to Alexa. The results would take approximately 72 hours. Rachel called in sick to work. She couldn't function, couldn't make small talk with customers while her entire world hung in the balance. She sat in her apartment staring at her phone, time moving with agonizing slowness. 72 hours passed, then 96. The lab was backlogged. Chan apologized for the delay but said there was nothing she could do to speed the process. Finally, on October 5th, 2020, 17 years and 2 weeks after Alexa vanished from a parking lot in KMA, Detective Sarah Chen appeared at Rachel's door in person. Her expression was carefully neutral, but there was something in her eyes that made Rachel's knees go weak. The DNA results came back. Chen said quietly, "Michelle Cordero is your daughter. It's a 99.9% match. Alexa is alive." Despite hearing the words, Rachel was unable to process them. Her vision became hazy. She felt Chen's hand on her arm guiding her to sit down. "She's alive," Rachel whispered. "After 17 years, she's alive." But even as relief and joy and disbelief crashed over her in waves, darker questions began to surface. If Alexa had been alive all this time, living under a different name just a few hours away, why hadn't she come home? Why hadn't she contacted her mother in 17 years? Chen seemed to...
Her daughter was alive. After 17 years of not knowing, of preparing herself for the worst, of slowly accepting that she would never see Alexa again, her daughter was alive. That night, Rachel pulled out the box of Alexa's belongings she'd kept all these years. She pressed the stuffed bear Coco to her face while holding it up. She looked at Alexa's school photo, that 16-year-old girl with the closed-lipped smile and the hazel eyes. She thought about the woman in the navy dress at the wedding, the woman with short brown hair and a life Rachel knew nothing about. They were the same person, separated by 17 years and circumstances Rachel couldn't yet comprehend. Somewhere, her daughter had changed completely in those missing years. And tomorrow, Rachel would finally learn why. Detective Chen called Rachel at 7:30 the next morning. "The interview is scheduled for 10 o'clock. I want you to know that Michelle, or Alexa, was initially resistant to speaking with us. She consulted with a lawyer last night, but ultimately she agreed to come involuntarily. She knows that we know who she is." Because she had cried all night, Rachel's voice was hoarse. "Can I see her? Can I be there?" "Not while the initial interview. I'm sorry, Mrs. Barth. We need to conduct this as an official investigation, but depending on what we learn, there may be an opportunity for you to see her afterward. I promise I'll keep you updated throughout the process." Rachel drove to San Marcos anyway, unable to sit still in her apartment. She parked outside the police department and waited in her car, her phone clutched in her hand. At 9:55, she saw a white Toyota Camry pull into the parking lot. A woman got out, moving slowly, reluctantly. She wore gray jeans and a sweater and tucked her short brown hair behind her ears. Even from a distance, Rachel recognized her posture, that slight hunch of the shoulders. Rachel's hand moved to the door handle, every instinct screaming at her to run to her daughter, to embrace her, to never let her go. But she forced herself to stay in the car. Chen had asked her to wait, to let them do their jobs. So Rachel sat, watching through tears, as the woman who used to be Alexa walked into the police station. The interview lasted 4 hours. Chen called Rachel twice during that time with brief updates, but she couldn't share details until the interview was complete. Rachel sat in her car the entire time, barely moving, barely breathing. Finally, at 2:15 in the afternoon, Chen emerged from the building and walked to Rachel's car. She slid into the passenger's seat and sat silently for a moment, as if gathering her thoughts. "This is complicated," Chen began. "More complicated than I expected. Your daughter is willing to speak with you? But first, she asked me to explain what happened. She said she doesn't know if she can say it all out loud to you directly, not yet. So she's given me permission to tell you the story." Rachel nodded, unable to speak. Chen pulled out a notebook, though Rachel suspected she didn't really need it, that every word of this interview was burned into her memory. In October 2003, Alexa went to meet someone she believed was a 24-year-old man named TJ. This part was already known to us,
What we didn't know was what happened after she got into that blue truck. Chen paused, choosing her words carefully. The man driving the truck was not 24. His real name is Robert James Cortland. He was 41 years old in 2003. He worked as an independent contractor doing renovation work on residential properties throughout the Houston area. The truck belonged to one of his clients, which is why we could never trace it through registration databases. Rachel's hands clenched into fists. Where is he? Is he arrested? I'm getting to that. Please let me explain everything first, Chen continued. Cortland drove Alexa to a house he was renovating in Friendswood, about 20 miles from Kame. The property had no occupants. He'd been working there for 2 weeks and had access to the property. He told Alexa that he was house-sitting for a friend and wanted to show her the place. She was nervous but trusted him because of the relationship they'd built online over months. Rachel felt sick. She knew where this was going. Had a clue from the moment Alexa disappeared that something terrible had happened. Cortland's demeanor changed when they got to the house. He secured the entrances. He told Alexa that if she tried to leave or scream, he would hurt her family. He showed her pictures he had taken of your house, of you leaving for work, of the license plate on Derek's truck. He'd been watching your family. He'd planned this meticulously. Chen's voice remained steady, professional, but Rachel could hear the anger underneath. For 3 weeks, he kept Alexa in that house. He moved her twice more over the following months, always to vacant properties he was working on, houses where no one would think to look.
He controlled her through fear and psychological manipulation. He told her that her family had stopped searching, that you believed she'd run away, that going to the police would put you in danger. With her whole body shaking, Rachel was now crying. Chen paused, waiting until Rachel could breathe again before continuing. In January 2004, Cortland told Alexa he was going to let her go, but only if she agreed to his conditions. He said he would give her money and documents to start a new life far away from Texas. If she ever contacted her family or went to the police, he would kill you, Mrs. Barth. He was very specific about that threat. He described exactly how he would do it. Alexa, then 17 years old, was traumatized and scared, so she believed him. Why didn't she run the moment he let her go? Rachel whispered. Because he didn't just let her go. He drove her to Oklahoma and kept her there for another 2 years, moving between cheap motels, always watching her, always reinforcing the threat. He had convinced her that he had people watching you, that he would know immediately if she tried to contact you. By the time he finally gave her false documentation and sent her to San Antonio in 2006, she was so psychologically broken that she couldn't imagine any other option. She genuinely believed that staying away was the only way to keep you safe. Chen closed her notebook. Cortland told her that if she created a stable, invisible life and never caused problems, he would leave her alone and leave you alone. He stated that if she completely changed into someone else and vanished, then everyone would eventually forget about her and move on. And to a traumatized 19-year-old girl who'd been held captive for nearly 3 years, that seemed like the only choice. The scale of the manipulation, the psychological torture, and Rachel's inability to process it, the years of her daughter living in fear, believing that staying away was an act of protection rather than abandonment. Where is she now? Rachel asked once more. Where is Robert Cortland? Chen's expression darkened. That's the other part of the story. Cortland was taken into custody in Louisiana in 2008 for attempting to kidnap another teen girl. She fought back, managed to escape, and immediately reported it to police. He was found guilty and given a 20-year prison term. He's currently incarcerated at Raymond Labor Correctional Center in Cottonport, Louisiana. Rachel's mind reeled. So, he's been in prison for 12 years and Alexa didn't know? She knew. She found out about his arrest in 2009 through a news article. She saw his photograph and recognized him immediately.
But by that point, she'd been Michelle Cordero for 3 years. She'd built a life, gotten her GED, started working, found an apartment. The thought of coming forward, of explaining where she'd been, of reliving the trauma, of possibly not being believed, it was overwhelming. And there was also shame, Mrs. Barth, deep shame about what had happened to her and about the fact that she'd stayed hidden for so long. Chen leaned forward, her voice gentler now. For the past 17 years, your daughter has been dealing with PTSD and complex trauma. She's been in therapy sporadically under her false identity, but she's never been able to tell anyone the complete truth. She's been essentially living in hiding from a man who's been locked up for over a decade because the psychological prison he created was so complete that she couldn't find her way out of it even after he was physically gone. Rachel wiped her eyes. Does she want to see me? She's terrified to see you. She's convinced you'll hate her for not coming home sooner, for letting you suffer for so many years. She said she spent 17 years imagining your face when you found out she was alive, and in every scenario she imagines, you can't forgive her. I could never hate her, Rachel said fiercely. She was a child. She was a victim. None of this was her fault. I know that, and you know that, but Alexa needs to hear it from you. She's in an interview room right now, and she's willing to see you if you're ready. The Mrs. Barth, I need you to understand that the daughter you're about to see is not the same girl who disappeared in 2003. She's been through experiences that changed her fundamentally. This reunion isn't going to be like what you see in movies. Rachel nodded. I understand. I just need to see her. I just need her to know that I never stopped loving her. Not for one single day. Chen led Rachel into the police station through a maze of corridors to a small room with a table and several chairs. Sitting in one of those chairs was a woman with short brown hair and hazel eyes who looked both completely familiar and entirely unknown. For a long moment, mother and daughter simply stared at each other across the small room. Alexa's face was pale, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She looked like she wanted to disappear, to make herself as small as possible. Rachel moved first, slowly crossing the room. She knelt down beside Alexa's chair at eye level with her daughter. Alexa, baby, look at me. Alexa's eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry I didn't come home. I thought I was protecting you.
I thought if I stayed away, he wouldn't hurt you. I'm sorry for all the years I make you believe I was dead or in pain somewhere. I'm sorry for everything. Rachel reached out and took her daughter's face in her hands the way she used to when Alexa was small and upset. You have nothing to apologize for. Do you hear me? Nothing. What happened to you was not your fault. You were 16 years old. You were manipulated and terrorized by a monster. You survived, Alexa. You survived, and you're here, and that's all that matters. Alexa broke down completely, sobbing in a way that sounded like 17 years of suffering held captive were finally released. Rachel pulled her daughter into her arms, holding her the way she dreamed of holding her for nearly 2 decades. They stayed like that for a long time, crying together, while Detective Chen quietly stepped out of the room to give them privacy. When they finally pulled apart, Rachel kept her hands on Alexa's shoulders, unwilling to let go completely. We're going to get through this, Rachel said together. I don't care how long it takes or how hard it is. You're my daughter, and I'm not losing you again. Alexa nodded, wiping her eyes. Now, Michelle is my name. I know that sounds strange, but I've been her longer than I was Alexa. I no longer know who I am. That's fine, Rachel advised. We'll figure it out together. You can be Michelle or Alexa or whoever you need to be. I'm just grateful you're alive. Over the following hours, with Detective Chen present, Alexa provided a detailed statement about everything Robert Kurland had done to her. He would never be free again because the information would be used to bring more charges against him. Louisiana prosecutors were already being contacted. It was nearly 7 o'clock at night when they were done. Chen asked Alexa if she wanted to press charges for the kidnapping and false imprisonment. Though she explained that the statute of limitations complicated matters since more than 17 years had passed. "I don't know what I want yet," Alexa said quietly. "I just need time to process all of this." Chen gave an understanding nod. "Take all the time you need. In the meantime, we'll be building the strongest case possible against Cortland. What he did to you was monstrous, and he deserves to face consequences for every single day he stole from you." Rachel and Alexa left the police station together as the sun was setting. They sat in Rachel's car in the parking lot. Both are not quite ready to part ways. "I have an apartment in Seabrook," Rachel said. "It's small, but there's a couch you could sleep on. Or if you need space, I understand. We can take this as slowly as you need." Alexa was quiet for a moment. "Would it be all right for me to accompany you just for tonight? I don't want to be alone right now." Rachel felt her heart swell. "Of course, baby, of course." As they drove back toward the Gulf Coast, back toward the town where this nightmare had begun 17 years ago, Rachel kept glancing at her daughter in the passenger seat. Alexa stared out the window at the darkening landscape. Lost in thoughts Rachel couldn't begin to imagine. They had found each other again, but this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be long and difficult, filled with therapy and legal proceedings, and the slow, painful work of healing from trauma that had shaped nearly half of Alexa's life. But they would walk that road together. After 17 years of separation, after 17 years of not knowing, they had been given a second chance that most families in their situation never received. The truth had finally emerged from the darkness, and with it the possibility of hope, albeit shaky hope. The apartment in Seabrook was smaller than Alexa remembered their old house being, but she'd been 16 when she last saw a place her mother called home. Rachel unlocked the door and turned on the lights, seeing everything through the prism of the 17 years Michelle Codera had lived. She had constructed these spaces between fear and survival. Suddenly self-conscious about the modest space. A worn couch faced the small TV. The kitchen was barely large enough for one person. But in the corner, carefully preserved, sat a cardboard box with Alexa's name written on it in faded marker. "I couldn't get rid of your things," Rachel said softly. "I moved them from place to place. People told me I should let go, but I couldn't." Alexa walked to the box and knelt beside it. Coco, the stuffed animal she'd slept with every night until she was 12, was contained within. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up. The bear still smelled faintly of the vanilla body spray she used to wear, a scent that transported her instantly back to being 16, to believing the world was safe, to the girl she used to be. That night, they sat on the couch with tea neither of them drank, talking in fragments. Not about the hard things, those would come later, but about smaller truths.
Alexa was shown pictures that Rachel had accumulated over time. Newspaper clippings about her disappearance, the website she'd maintained. Alexa wept, seeing the evidence of her mother's relentless love, the years of searching, the vigils, the candles that had been lit in her memory. "I followed your case," Alexa admitted quietly. "Once I was Michelle, once I had internet access and some freedom, I would search for my own name. Every update you posted on the website was read by me. I saw the age progression photos. I wanted so badly to tell you I was alive, but I was convinced that reaching out would put you in danger. Even after I found out Cortland was in prison, I couldn't break free of what he'd programmed into me. The fear became part of who I was." Rachel took her daughter's hand. "He stole so much from both of us, but he doesn't get to steal any more. You're here now, and we're going to reclaim what we can." The next morning, Detective Chen called with news. The Louisiana authorities had been contacted and were preparing additional charges against Robert Cortland based on Alexa's testimony. His earliest possible parole date had been 2028, but with new charges of kidnapping, aggravated false imprisonment, and exploitation of a minor, he would likely die in prison. "There's something else," Chen said. "When we searched Cortland's property and storage units after his 2008 arrest in Louisiana, investigators found documentation related to multiple victims. Because he was arrested in a different state and the evidence was never properly analyzed, your case was never linked to him. But now that we know to look, we're finding records that suggest he'd been grooming and potentially abducting young women for years. The FBI is reopening several cold cases that might be connected to him. Rachel felt a chill. The other girls, the ones who disappeared from Gulf Coast towns. We're investigating. It's possible Alexa wasn't his only victim. If we can connect him to other cases, we might finally give other families the answers they've been waiting for. Over the following weeks, Alexa began the difficult process of reclaiming her identity. Legally, she was still Alexa Marie Barth, though Michelle Corderero had accumulated 10 years of work history, credit, and tax records. Untangling the two identities required lawyers, documentation, and patience. But more challenging than the paperwork was the psychological work. Alexa started seeing Dr. Patricia Morales, a trauma specialist in Houston who worked specifically with survivors of long-term captivity and manipulation. Alexa was forced to confront memories she had spent years trying to forget during the exhausting sessions. "I feel like two different people," Alexa told her mother one evening. "Michelle is competent and functional, but she's also empty inside. She exists to be invisible. And Alexa, the girl I was before, she feels like someone I barely knew, someone from a dream I can't quite remember." "Then maybe you don't have to be either of them completely," Rachel suggested gently. "Maybe you get to decide who you are now, taking pieces of both and building something new." The story of Alexa's recovery made national news in November 2020. Rachel had initially resisted the publicity, wanting to protect her daughter's privacy, but Alexa made a different choice. She agreed to do one television interview with a major network, believing her story could help other victims understand that escape and recovery were possible even after years of captivity and psychological control. The interview aired on a Tuesday evening. Alexa, identifying herself as Alexa Barth, formerly living as Michelle Corderero, spoke clearly and calmly about her experience. She described the grooming process that predators use online, the psychological tactics Cortland employed to maintain control, and the long road of healing she was now walking. She spoke directly into the camera. "I want other survivors to know that the shame you feel is not yours to carry. What happened to me wasn't my fault. I was a child, and even when I was legally an adult, I was operating under trauma and fear that distorted my ability to make free choices. If you're out there hiding because someone convinced you that staying silent was the only way to survive, please know that there are people who will believe you and help you. It's never too late to come home." The response was overwhelming. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children received hundreds of calls in the days following the broadcast. 3 women came forward claiming they'd also been victimized by Robert Cortland in the 1990s and early 2000s. They were able to connect him to 2 other Gulf Coast disappearances that remain unsolved thanks to their testimony. One of those cases was Lisa Chen from Port Arthur, who had vanished in 2001 at age 15. Her remains were discovered in 2004 in a wooded area near Beaumont, but her case had never been solved. Cortland is now linked to her death by evidence. Lisa's mother, who had spent 19 years not knowing who had killed her daughter, finally had answers. Another case involved Maria Gutierrez from Corpus Christi, who disappeared in 1999 at age 14. She had never been found, but documentation discovered in Cortland's storage unit suggested he'd held her captive for nearly 2 years before she either escaped or was killed. The investigation remained ongoing. Alexa struggled with survivor's guilt. Knowing she'd lived while others hadn't, Dr. Morales reminded her repeatedly that her survival wasn't something to feel guilty about, that bearing witness and helping to bring justice for other victims was a way of honoring those who didn't make it home. By December, Alexa had moved in with Rachel permanently, reclaiming the daughter's role she'd been forced to abandon. She continued working as a dental hygienist, but transferred to a clinic in League City, closer to home. She kept the name Michelle professionally, finding it easier than explaining her complicated history to every patient and coworker. But with family and close friends, she was Alexa again. Christmas that year was bittersweet. Rachel decorated for the first time since 2003, hanging lights and setting up a small tree. Alexa helped, though she admitted that normal activities like this felt strange after so many years of living in emotional lockdown. On Christmas morning, they sat together on the couch drinking coffee and watching the sun rise over Galveston Bay. Rachel had bought Alexa a new stuffed animal, a small brown bear similar to Coco. The gesture made Alexa cry, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that she was safe, that she was home, that she was permitted to return to being vulnerable. "I kept thinking about all the Christmases we missed," Rachel said quietly. 17 of them. I can't get those back. But I can be grateful for every Christmas from now on. Alexa leaned her head on her mother's shoulder. "I thought about you every single one of those years, every birthday, every holiday. I would imagine what you were doing and inquire about your health. I'm sorry I couldn't let you know I was alive." "Stop apologizing," Rachel said firmly. "You survived a monster. You found a way to keep living even when everything had been taken from you. I'm not angry, baby. I'm proud of you." In February 2021, Alexa attended a victim impact hearing for Robert Cortland's sentencing on the new charges. With her mother beside her, she stood before the man who had taken 17 years from her family and destroyed her childhood. Cortland looked older than she remembered, his hair gray, his face lined. In an orange jumpsuit, he sat, shackled, staring straight ahead with no expression. He never looked at her once during the entire proceeding. When given the opportunity to speak, Alexa stood at the podium and read a statement she'd prepared with Dr. Morales. Her voice shook at first, but grew stronger as she continued. "You took my childhood. You took my family. You took years of my life that I will never get back. You convinced me that I was powerless, that I had no choice, that staying silent was the only way to survive. But you were wrong. I did survive. I built a life despite everything you did to break me. And now I'm reclaiming the parts of myself that you tried to destroy." She paused, looking directly at him for the first time. "You don't have power over me anymore. You're going to die in prison, and I'm going to live. I'm going to heal. I'm going to help other survivors find their way home. And every day that I wake up free is a victory that you can never take away from me." Cortland was sentenced to an additional 45 years in prison consecutive to his existing sentence. He would never walk free again. As he was led out of the courtroom, Alexa felt something shift inside her.
A weight she'd carried for so long, finally beginning to lift. By spring, Alexa had settled into a routine that felt almost normal. She went to therapy twice a week. She had coffee with her mother every Sunday morning. She'd reconnected with Brittany, her old friend from high school, who was now married with 2 children and working as a teacher. Their friendship would never be what it was in 2003. Too much time had passed. But they built something new based on who they were now rather than who they'd been. Alexa also joined a support group for survivors of long-term trauma and trafficking. She felt less alone when she heard other people's stories and saw her own experiences reflected in theirs. She began to understand that healing wasn't linear, that there would be good days and setbacks, that reclaiming her life was a process that would take years. On October 18, 2021, 18 years to the day after her disappearance, Alexa and Rachel returned to the Kame Boardwalk. They walked the pier together in the afternoon sunshine, past the Ferris wheel and the restaurants, past the spot where 16-year-old Alexa had once stood, waiting for someone she thought she could trust. They stopped at the memorial bench, the one with Alexa's name and those painful dates, 1987 to 2003. Rachel had contacted the city about changing the plaque, about removing that premature death date and replacing it with something that is more precise. "What do you want it to say?" Rachel had asked. Alexa had thought about it for a long time before answering. "How about just my name, and she came home? That's what matters, not the years I was gone, but the fact that I made it back." The new plaque was installed in November. It read simply, "Alexa Marie Barth. She came home." The case of Alexa Barth led to changes in how law enforcement approached cold cases involving missing teenagers and how they investigated potential connections between predators and multiple victims across jurisdictions.
Her story became part of training materials for FBI agents specializing in crimes against children. But beyond the systemic changes and the justice served, Alexa's story became a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the unbreakable bond between a mother and daughter. Rachel had never stopped searching, never stopped hoping, never stopped believing that somehow, against all odds, her daughter would come home. And Alexa, despite years of psychological captivity, even after her physical captivity ended, had found the courage to step back into the light. Their story didn't have a perfect ending. Alexa still had nightmares. She still struggled with trust and anxiety. The years they'd lost could never be recovered, but they had each other, and they had tomorrow, and the tomorrow after that. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, they would sit together on Rachel's couch, Alexa holding Coco the way she used to as a child, and Rachel would stroke her daughter's hair and whisper the same words she'd whispered every night for 17 years, sending them out into the universe, hoping they would somehow reach their destination. I love you, baby girl. Come home safe. And finally, impossibly, miraculously, she had.